The crystal palace of Asteria glittered like a frozen tear against the purple sky of Nexus Prime. Within its translucent walls, Princess Lyra stood before the Royal Medical Council, her silver skin reflecting the harsh light of the examination chamber. The verdict remained unchanged: she was barren, incapable of producing an heir to the Asterian throne. "The tests are conclusive, Your Highness," declared head physician Dax, his crystalline eyes avoiding her gaze. "Your genetic structure remains incompatible with our reproduction methods." Lyra's shoulders dropped ever so slightly, the only outward sign of her despair. 20 cycles of testing, treatments, and failure had led to this moment. In the Astrian Empire, a barren royal was worse than no royal at all. King Orion, her father, paced the chamber like a caged predator. His crystalline crown pulsed with barely contained rage. "The bloodline cannot end. The empire cannot fall." His voice echoed off the chamber walls. "If our methods fail, we must look elsewhere." The council members shifted uncomfortably. Looking elsewhere meant considering options that many Asterians viewed as beneath them. But desperate times called for desperate measures. "The Earth delegation arrives tomorrow," announced Royal Advisor Thea, her voice measured and calm. "Their ambassador brings word of their most accomplished warriors and leaders. Perhaps a solution lies with them." Lyra's heart raced. Humans. The newest species to join the Galactic Alliance. They were considered primitive by many, yet their adaptability and genetic diversity had caught the attention of several ancient races, including, it seemed, her own. King Orion stopped pacing. "The humans breed like wildfire," he mused, his tone shifting from disgust to calculation. "Their genetic structure is remarkably adaptive. Perhaps..." "Father," Lyra spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "You cannot mean to..." "Silence!" The king's crown flared bright red. "You will do what is necessary for the Empire. If that means breeding with a human to produce an heir, then so be it." The council chamber fell silent. Lyra felt the weight of centuries of tradition and responsibility crushing down upon her. Tomorrow, the Earth delegation would arrive, unknowing that one of their number would be chosen to save the Astrian bloodline, and that the princess they would receive was considered damaged goods by her own people. As she left the chamber, Lyra caught her reflection in the crystal walls. Her silver skin sparkled with health, belying the emptiness within. She was the first Astrian royal in 10,000 years to be barren. Now she would be the first to mix their pure bloodline with another species. She could only hope that whoever they chose from the Earth delegation would be different from the stories she'd heard, of humans' brutal strength, their wild emotions, their unpredictable nature. Because soon, one of them would be more than just her mate. They would be the key to her redemption, or the final nail in her coffin. The purple sun of Nexus Prime began to set, casting long shadows through the Crystal Palace. Tomorrow would bring the humans, and with them, a chance to save everything Lyra held dear, even if it meant sacrificing the last shreds of her pride to do it. The Earth delegation's ship descended through Nexus Prime's atmosphere like a falling star. Princess Lyra watched from her crystal tower as the vessel's hull shifted from burning orange to gleaming silver, its adaptive coating adjusting to the planet's environment. The sight made her stomach twist with anxiety. Among the arriving humans was her future mate, someone who would either save her bloodline or seal her fate as a failure to the Empire. "The delegation has brought 5 candidates," Advisor Thea informed her, scrolling through a holographic display. "All of them meet our basic requirements: accomplished warriors, leaders, and genetically compatible with our species." Lyra's fingers traced patterns on the crystal windowpane. "Tell me about them." "The most promising is Commander Marcus Stone," Thea began. "He leads Earth's most elite space fleet division. His genetic profile shows remarkable adaptability." The name echoed in Lyra's mind. Marcus Stone. Would he be the one? The welcoming ceremony began in the Grand Hall, its crystal walls amplifying every sound until the march of human boots against the floor seemed to shake the entire palace. Lyra stood beside her father's throne, watching as the delegation entered. 5 humans stepped forward, each different from the last. But Lyra's eyes were drawn immediately to the tallest among them. Commander Stone carried himself with quiet confidence, his dark eyes taking in the alien surroundings without betraying any emotion. Unlike his companions, who seemed awed or uncomfortable in the Crystal Palace, he appeared perfectly at ease. King Orion's voice boomed through the hall. "Welcome, Earth delegation. You have been summoned here for a matter of great importance to the Astrian Empire." The human ambassador stepped forward, but Lyra barely heard the formal exchanges. She was studying Commander Stone, trying to reconcile everything she'd learned about humans with the man before her. His skin was tanned from real sunlight, a rarity among spacefaring peoples. A thin scar traced his jaw, speaking of battles survived. When his eyes met hers, she felt a jolt of something. Not the revulsion she'd expected to feel toward a human. The formal announcement of the Empire's intentions sent shockwaves through the delegation. A royal marriage alliance was unexpected enough. The revelation that it was their only hope for an heir caused visible shock among the humans. "This is highly irregular," the Earth ambassador sputtered. "Our people would need time to consider." "Time is a luxury we do not have," King Orion cut in. "The candidates will be tested for compatibility over the next 3 days. One will be chosen. This is not a request, but a requirement of our continued alliance." Lyra watched the 5 candidates' reactions. 3 showed clear discomfort. 1 looked intrigued by the possibility of power. But Commander Stone's expression remained unreadable, his eyes finding hers again with quiet intensity. Later that evening, as the candidates were led to their quarters, Lyra overheard Stone speaking with one of his fellow officers. "It's a cage, no matter how pretty the bars," the other officer said. "They're desperate, using us like breeding stock." Stone's response was measured, thoughtful. "They're trying to survive. Sometimes survival means adapting in ways you never expected." The words stayed with Lyra as she retired to her chambers. Perhaps this human understood more than she'd given him credit for. As she lay in her crystal bed, watching the purple moonlight paint patterns on her ceiling, she allowed herself to hope. Tomorrow, the testing would begin. The humans would be evaluated for genetic compatibility, physical capabilities, and mental resilience. But Lyra had already made her choice, even if she wasn't supposed to have one. She only hoped Commander Stone would prove to be as adaptable as his reputation suggested. Because surviving in the Crystal Palace would require more than just physical strength or genetic compatibility. It would require someone who could navigate the deadly politics of an alien court while carrying the weight of 2 civilizations' expectations on their shoulders. And somewhere in the palace, behind walls that looked like ice but burned with hidden fire, King Orion was already plotting how to use this alliance to his advantage, regardless of what it might cost his daughter or the human who would soon be bound to her forever. The first day of testing began before Nexus Prime's purple sun had fully risen. In the ancient testing grounds beneath the Crystal Palace, Princess Lyra watched from a viewing chamber as the 5 human candidates faced their trials. The chamber hummed with energy as holographic opponents materialized around Commander Stone. Unlike the other candidates who had gone before him, he didn't immediately attack. Instead, he observed, analyzed, and then moved with precise efficiency. His combat style wasn't just about strength, it showed intelligence and adaptation. "Remarkable," murmured head physician Dax, monitoring vital signs. "His body adapts to our atmosphere's higher gravity without strain. And look at how he processes multiple threats simultaneously." Lyra found herself holding her breath as she watched. The other candidates had performed well enough, but Stone moved like he'd been training for this his entire life. When a crystalline spear grazed his arm, drawing blood, he didn't even flinch. Instead, he used the momentum to disarm his opponent. "His genetic markers are fascinating," Dax continued, bringing up a complex display. "See how his DNA structure readily accepts modification. It could theoretically adapt to combine with Astrian genetics." The second trial tested mental resilience. Each candidate was subjected to telepathic probing, a standard practice in Astrian politics. 3 of the candidates could barely withstand it. The 4th managed adequately. But when it was Stone's turn, something unexpected happened. He didn't just endure the telepathic scan, he engaged with it. Lyra felt it herself, as all royal Asterians were telepathically linked during such procedures. Stone's mind was ordered, disciplined, but beneath that lay something that caught her completely off guard: compassion. Not pity for her situation, but a genuine understanding of duty and sacrifice. "How did you do that?" she asked him later, during the brief rest period between trials. They stood in one of the palace's crystal gardens, where earth plants were being tested for compatibility with Asterian soil. Stone studied a blue flower struggling to bloom in the alien environment. "On Earth, we have a saying: the best defense isn't always a wall. Sometimes it's a window." "You're not what I expected," Lyra admitted, watching as he gently supported the flower's stem with a small crystal shard. "Neither are you," he replied, his dark eyes meeting her silver ones. "They said Asterians were cold, logical to a fault. But you're different. You feel deeply, you just hide it well." The moment was interrupted by King Orion's arrival. The other candidates had been dismissed, their genetic profiles deemed insufficient. Now only Stone remained. "The final trial begins tomorrow," the king announced, his crown pulsing with ambitious energy. "Commander Stone, you will face the crucible of adaptation. No outsider has ever survived it. But then, no outsider has ever needed to continue our royal bloodline." After the king left, Lyra turned to Stone. "The crucible, it's not just a test. It will attempt to rewrite your genetic code to be more compatible with ours. The process is excruciating." Stone's face remained calm, but his fingers brushed against hers, the first physical contact between them. The touch sent a shock through her silver skin. "I've studied your culture's history," he said quietly. "Your people believe that nothing valuable comes without sacrifice. This sacrifice could kill you. Some things are worth dying for." His gaze was steady. "But I prefer to live for them instead." That night, as Lyra prepared for bed, she received an urgent message from Advisor Thea. The contents made her blood run cold. She'd discovered the truth behind her father's haste, a truth that changed everything. The king hadn't chosen humans just for their genetic adaptability. He'd chosen them because they were new to the Galactic Alliance, politically vulnerable. Once an heir was produced, the human mate would be disposable. And any offspring would be purely Asterian, thanks to genetic manipulation that would erase all human traits. It wasn't just a marriage alliance. It was genetic theft on a royal scale. And tomorrow, the man who had shown her the first real kindness she'd known would walk into a trap disguised as a trial. Unless she found a way to stop it. The purple moon cast shadows through her crystal windows as Lyra made her decision. She would not be another piece in her father's cosmic game of chess. Not this time. Not with these stakes. Not with him. Time was running out. Princess Lyra raced through the crystalline corridors of the palace, her silver skin reflecting the emergency lights that pulsed through the walls. The crucible chamber would activate at dawn, and she had to reach Commander Stone before it was too late. The guards at Stone's quarters were easy to dismiss. One benefit of being royal was that few questioned her orders. She found him preparing for the trial, studying Asterian texts on his data pad. "You can't go through with the crucible," she burst out, her usually composed voice trembling. "It's not what you think." Stone set down the pad, his dark eyes searching her face. "What's wrong?" Lyra pressed her hand against the crystal wall, activating a privacy field. "The crucible isn't just about making you compatible. It's designed to..." She struggled with the words. "To harvest your genetic material while eliminating all human traits from any potential offspring. You would survive the process." Instead of the shock or anger she expected, Stone's expression showed understanding. "I suspected something like this," he said quietly. "The genetic sequencing equipment I saw being prepared was too aggressive for mere compatibility testing." "You knew?" Lyra stared at him. "Then why didn't you try to escape?" "Because running would prove everything they believe about humans, that we're primitive, unreliable, unworthy of trust." He stepped closer, his presence somehow both powerful and gentle. And because I saw something in you worth staying for. The privacy field crackled with warning. They had minutes at most before security protocols would force it down. There's more. Lyra pressed on. My father, he's planning to use this as leverage against Earth. Once he has an heir with Astrian traits, he'll claim Earth attempted to contaminate the royal bloodline. He'll use it to demand concessions, maybe even military access to Earth's territories. Stone's jaw tightened. A political coup disguised as a marriage alliance. Clever. I won't let you be sacrificed for his ambitions. Lyra's voice grew stronger. There's another way. The old texts speak of a binding ceremony, older than the Crucible. A true joining of beings, where both parties survive and contribute equally to the offspring. Your father would never allow it. He won't have a choice if we complete it before the Crucible. Lyra pulled out a small crystal vial filled with swirling silver liquid. This is royal essence, my genetic material in its purest form. If you willingly bond with it, not through the Crucible but through the ancient rites, the joining cannot be undone or manipulated. Stone took the vial, studying the swirling contents. Even if we succeed, we'd be fugitives. Your father wouldn't forgive this defiance. No, Lyra agreed. But our child would be truly both of us, human and Astrian. Living proof that our peoples can join as equals, not through dominance and destruction. The privacy field flickered. Guards were gathering outside, their shadows visible through the crystal walls. Stone made his decision. He uncapped the vial. How do we do this? Lyra's hands shook as she guided him through the steps. Drink half, then speak the words I teach you. The ceremony is simple but permanent. Once done, neither science nor politics can undo it. As Stone raised the vial to his lips, the privacy field shattered. King Orion stood in the doorway, his crown blazing with fury. Stop them! He roared. But he was too late. Stone had already swallowed the royal essence, his skin beginning to shimmer with a subtle silver sheen. Lyra drank the other half, feeling the human genetic material merge with her own. I bind myself to you. They spoke in unison, their voices mixing with the ancient power of the ceremony. Two beings, one future, equal in all things. The king's guards surrounded them, weapons raised, but they couldn't interrupt the ceremony now. Energy crackled between Lyra and Stone, their genetic codes intertwining in a way that no laboratory could replicate or undo. King Orion's voice cut through the air like a blade. What have you done? Lyra stood tall, her hand finding Stone's. Where their skin touched, silver and gold light pulsed in harmony. What you should have done from the beginning, Father. I chose hope over fear, unity over dominance. The genetic scanner in the corner beeped insistently. On its display, two DNA patterns spiraled together, forming something entirely new. And in that moment, as alarms blared and guards closed in, Princess Lyra felt life stirring within her, a tiny spark that was neither fully human nor fully Astrian, but gloriously, defiantly both. The Crystal Palace's detention level had never held a member of the royal family before. Now it held two. Princess Lyra and Commander Stone sat in a cell reinforced with energy fields, their newly bonded genetic signatures causing the crystal walls to pulse with unusual patterns. The child grows stronger by the hour, head physician Dax announced, studying his instruments through the barrier. The genetic merger is unprecedented. Both human and Astrian traits are perfectly balanced. King Orion stalked the corridor outside their cell, his crown crackling with barely contained rage. Perfectly balanced? This abomination will destroy thousands of years of pure bloodline. Father. Lyra's voice was steady, her hand intertwined with Stone's. This child is the future, proof that our peoples can truly unite. Can't you see the possibility in that? Possibility? The king laughed bitterly. I see only ruin. The other noble houses will never accept a half-breed heir. The Earth delegation is demanding explanations. You've started a diplomatic crisis. As if summoned by his words, Advisor Thea rushed into the detention level, her crystalline tablet displaying urgent messages. Your Majesty, The Galactic Alliance Council has called an emergency session. They're voting to recognize the binding ceremony as legally valid under ancient laws. The king's crown flared dangerously. What? The human ambassadors provided evidence that Commander Stone's actions were voluntary, and the ceremony predates all modern genetic manipulation laws. The Alliance views this as a legitimate royal union. Stone spoke for the first time since their imprisonment, his voice carrying the authority of his military command. Your Majesty, this doesn't have to be a crisis. It could be an opportunity. An opportunity? The king's voice dripped with scorn. Think about it. Stone continued, standing to face the king. Instead of forcing an alliance through genetic manipulation and political blackmail, you now have a willing union. A child that bridges two worlds. The first of its kind. Lyra felt the tiny life within her pulse with energy, as if responding to its father's words. The silver sheen of her skin had taken on a subtle golden undertone where Stone's genetics had merged with hers. The noble houses are already divided on this, Thea added carefully. House Vega sees the strategic advantage of a willing human alliance. House Nova is intrigued by the genetic implications. And the common people? She hesitated. Speak, the king commanded. They're celebrating in the streets. The idea of a love match, defying tradition for the good of both peoples, it resonates with them. They're calling it the unity binding. King Orion's pacing stopped. For the first time, calculation replaced rage in his eyes. The people celebrate? Yes, Your Majesty. And the human populations in our territories are responding similarly. They see it as proof that true equality between our species is possible. Lyra stood beside Stone, their joined hands glowing softly. Father, you taught me that a ruler must sometimes adapt to survive. That's all we've done. We've adapted. And in doing so, we may have found a way to strengthen both our peoples. The king stared at them through the energy barrier. The genetic scanner continued its steady beeping, displaying the miracle growing within his daughter, a perfect fusion of two species, something that all his careful plotting and advanced science had failed to achieve. The child's power readings are extraordinary. Dax interjected, unable to contain his scientific excitement. The combination of human adaptability and Astrian energy manipulation, we've never seen anything like it. A long moment passed. The crystal walls hummed with tension. Finally, King Orion spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries of tradition and the pull of necessary change. Release them, he ordered. As the energy barrier fell, he stepped closer to his daughter and her chosen mate. You've forced my hand. Defied my will. Destroyed my plans? His crown pulsed once, then settled into a calmer rhythm. And in doing so, you may have saved our empire from stagnation. Lyra felt tears of relief sliding down her silver cheeks. Stone's arm wrapped protectively around her waist, his touch sending ripples of gold through her skin. But know this, the king continued, his eyes fixing on Stone. If this unity binding is to be our new path, you will both bear the responsibility of making it work. The child you carry must be more than just an heir. It must be living proof that this defiance was worth the cost. As they left the detention level, emerging into the purple light of Nexus Prime's setting sun, Lyra felt the future shifting around them like the facets of a crystal catching light. Their child would be neither fully human nor purely Astrian, but something new. Something that could bridge the vast gulf between stars and species. And perhaps that had been the true purpose of her supposed barrenness all along, to force an evolution that mere biology could never achieve. 6 months had transformed the Crystal Palace. Where once there were only the cold, geometric patterns of pure Astrian architecture, now earth plants twined through crystal latticework, creating a harmony of organic and mineral beauty. It was a physical reflection of the changes sweeping through the empire. Princess Lyra stood in the newly constructed Unity Garden, her swollen belly visible beneath her royal robes. The child within her had grown stronger than any pure-blooded Astrian heir in recorded history. Her silver skin now permanently held traces of gold, marking her genetic bond with Stone. The final trimester readings are remarkable. Head physician Dax announced, his initial scientific skepticism long since replaced by wonder. The child carries the best of both species. Human adaptive capabilities, Asterian energy manipulation, and some entirely new traits we're still trying to understand. Commander Stone, now Prince Consort Stone, placed a protective hand on Lyra's shoulder. Over the months, his own transformation had become evident. His skin occasionally shimmered with silver light, and he had developed a limited ability to interface with Asterian technology. The unity binding had changed them both. The noble houses have submitted their final votes. Advisor Thea approached, her crystal tablet displaying the results. With House Nova's support, we now have a supermajority accepting the child as legitimate heir to the throne. King Orion, who had been quietly observing from a crystal bench, stood. His crown, once constantly pulsing with aggressive energy, now glowed with a steady, calm light. And the Galactic Alliance? They're using our success as a model, Thea replied. 3 other worlds have already adopted the unity binding as a legal framework for interspecies marriages. They're calling it the Nexus Protocol. Lyra felt the child kick, a powerful movement that sent ripples of gold and silver light across her skin. Stone steadied her, their bond allowing him to share in the sensation. It's time, Dax suddenly announced, his instruments beeping urgently. The child comes. The birth of an Asterian royal had always been a private affair, attended only by the highest-ranking physicians. But this birth was different. Representatives from both Earth and Asteria gathered in the sacred birthing chamber, where crystal and organic medical equipment worked in harmony. As Lyra's labor progressed, the crystal walls of the palace itself seemed to pulse in rhythm with her contractions. Stone never left her side, their shared genetics allowing him to support her in ways no Asterian royal consort ever had before. With a final surge of energy that sent waves of gold and silver light cascading through the entire palace, the child was born. A daughter, Dax announced, his voice filled with awe. Perfect in every way. The infant princess was a sight to behold. Her skin shifted between silver and gold like the surface of a star. Her eyes, when they opened, were dark like her father's but held the crystalline patterns of her Asterian heritage. Most remarkably, the plants in the Unity Gardens suddenly bloomed out of season, responding to her first cries. King Orion approached slowly, his expression unreadable as he gazed down at his granddaughter. The child reached up with tiny fingers, and where she touched his crown, the crystal resonated with a tone never before heard in the palace. She bridges more than just our species, the king said softly. She bridges the gap between what we were and what we can become. The news spread quickly through both Earth and Asterian space. The first Unity child, as she came to be known, represented hope for countless worlds. Her existence proved that the barriers between species could be overcome, that love and choice could triumph over tradition and fear. They named her Aurora, for she represented the dawn of a new age. 1 year later, as Aurora took her first steps in the Unity Garden, her ability to communicate with both crystal technology and organic life made it clear that she was neither better nor worse than a pure-blooded heir. She was simply different. And in that difference lay infinite possibility. I once thought I was barren, Lyra said to Stone as they watched their daughter play. Now I realize I was just waiting for the right evolution. Stone pulled her close, their shared genetics creating patterns of light where they touched. Sometimes the universe has larger plans than we can imagine. From her crystal throne, Aurora giggled, the sound causing flowers to bloom and crystals to sing. She was living proof that the future belonged not to those who clung to purity, but to those brave enough to embrace change. And in the great archive of the Galactic Alliance, the story of a barren alien princess and a human commander became legend, not just a tale of love conquering tradition, but of how the courage to defy destiny could birth a whole new universe of possibilities.